consultations, and out of that consultation, we came up with 3 conflict epochs. The pre-independence, the second one being the 1982-1983 Gukurahundi, and then the third one, the 2000 going forward. And out of these 3 conflict epochs, we have created vehicles as a commission to enable the commission to heal our past. We also created vehicles to resolve our current conflicts, and we've created vehicles to facilitate recommendations for policy, legislative changes to create a never again in our country. Those vehicles, the thematic committees, we came up with 4 external thematic committees. The Healing and Reconciliation Thematic Committee, chaired by brother Commissioner Leslie. The Conflict Prevention and Non-Recurrence, chaired by Commissioner Patience Chiraza. The Research and Knowledge Management, chaired by Commissioner Ndoro, Choice Ndoro. The Victim Support, Gender and Diversity, chaired by myself. We also have internal thematic committees, and these are the ones that enable the Commission to engage with victims. So we have critically the investigations and complaints handling. This is internally looking, so that those that are going to be engaging with the Commission will find space to do so. It is this committee that will also investigate issues that are brought to the Commission. So if a complaint comes, it is this committee that will facilitate the investigations of issues that would have been raised. But critically to say, in terms of the NPRC Act, the Commission is empowered to initiate investigations without a complaint being made. But we will, again, in a lot of the investigations, be guided by the complaints and the victims that will come to this thematic committee. I'm not going to talk about, I have colleagues sitting amongst us who also just briefly talk about these thematic committees, colleagues that we've been engaging as we're developing the terms of reference. So as a commission, we didn't sit and came up with our terms of reference, but we sat down with the different stakeholders to develop terms of reference, to develop parameters, to conceptualize these thematic committees. And after me, I'm going to request colleagues amongst us to also just briefly speak to some of these thematic committees. In terms of strategy, the Commission agreed that we are going to engage with communities through a bottom-up approach, a participatory approach, because we appreciate that even though we are the Commission and playing a facilitative role, we can never replace the voice of those that were affected. We also can never replace the voice of those communities that were affected. And so for the Commission, we remain and will continue guided by the stakeholders, we continue guided by the communities. This process that we are here, and like my brother said, we are bringing back the strategic plan. So out of all these processes, we came up with the 5-year strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, the 5-year strategic plan, we have prioritized working through these thematic committees that I talked about. And it is these thematic committees that will be engaging with all of us. So as even we work here, all these thematic committees, through the representatives that have been identified, and that will be identified in all the provinces, will spearhead the work of the Commission. And one may ask why. Again, it is very strategic. You can never replace organizations that have been engaging with communities for a long time. You have organizations like Masakaneni Trust, they've been there. Christian Alliance have been there. And so, as a commission, we then identified all these organizations. And if you feel your organization has been working at different levels, has presence in communities, please let's engage, because the commission will want to just play a facilitative role, but critically bring all your efforts from community through to national level, realizing that the commission has an obligation to then bring all these issues to Parliament. So having developed our 5-year strategic plan, the Commission then came up with the 2019 plan. And the 2019 plan is just the beginning of implementation. And the reason why we went around the country, so this is the last outreach program, is so that we get feedback. Feedback in terms of whether we got the issues right. Feedback in terms of how we implement that strategy. So your presence here is most valued because it allows us to get feedback in terms of how we should then start implementing the strategy. So it's one thing to have a very good strategy, it's another to have a very good implementation mechanism. And for us to come up with a clear and responsive implementation mechanism, we felt it was important for us to come back, go back to the provinces so that we have feedback in terms of how we are going to implement that strategic plan. So 2019, we came up with a strategic priorities for 2019. And this is just the beginning, so that I preempt the question whether your priorities will be exhausted in 2019. Indeed, no. The 2019 is the beginning of actual implementation. So the first priority that the Commission came up with was sitting and developing the key enablers. So these are important, and the reason why we focused on developing, and this is what we have been doing since January, developing the key enablers to allow us to engage at community level. Because some may be asking, why are we sitting in Holiday Inn? Those that were affected are in the communities. We had to go through a process of developing the key enablers. And what are these key enablers? If you look at the complaints handling and investigations, you actually need to develop the tools. You want to develop tools that will assure victims that their information is going to be safe. You want to develop tools that will make victims feel safe to be engaging with the Commission. You want to develop tools that will ensure that we create an archive of information. And this is the process that thematic committee is still seized with, to ensure that when victims start engaging with the communities, we are ready in terms of receiving them. We also are developing key enablers, for example, within the victim, gender, and diversity thematic committees. This is the heart of the Commission. Victims, and like the chair already indicated, victims are at the center. Women that were affected are at the center of the work of the Commission. But if you do not prepare well, you can do more harm. if you do not ensure that you have created enablers around the victim, you can do more harm. So what this thematic committee is again trying to do is to ensure that we identify partners that are able to provide certain services, we get into strategic partnerships to ensure we are responsive to the needs of the victims. It would have been the easiest would have been just to wake up. And I know this question we are asked all the time. The work that we are dealing with is extremely sensitive, extremely emotional. The easiest would have been to just wake up and be in a community and listen to the concerns, the conflict that affected the victim. But having been a practitioner in this area for over 20 years, I will tell you, you would have done more harm. So you want to get into a community and ensure that a victim who requires psychosocial support is able to be provided with that psychosocial support. A victim who requires justice, because there's someone who says everything else does not matter, I just want justice. You want to have created partnerships that allows that a victim to receive justice. So we have been going through a process of creating the key enablers that allow the victims to be able to engage with the commission. So if you look at all the key enablers, for example, for the victim, for the conflict prevention and non-recurrence, you want to be able to develop a dialogue framework. A lot of people talk about having dialogues. Is that what we want to do with the NPRC? We then again are sitting and saying, let's come up with a dialogue framework, and a dialogue framework that will be responsive to all the issues that we identified as we went around the country. So a key issue that the Commission has been seized with is to develop those key enablers. We have had situations where people's information has been exposed, and key enabler is to actually come up with an information management system that allows people to feel safe if they bring their evidence, to ensure that that evidence is going to be safe. So this is something that the Commission again has been seized with. And linked to that is then to start the actual face-to-face engagement with stakeholders. So we went again, we're doing these outreach programs, and out of these outreach programs, like I indicated, it was actually then engaging with stakeholders and getting feedback in terms of the tools, in terms of the how, the when, the way, to allow the Commission to then actually be in the Commission. The other issue in terms of the 2019 initiative interventions is also the setting up of the provincial and national peace committees. This is very important. We appreciate that organizations have been setting up peace committees, and the Commission is not coming in to replace those or to dilute. In fact, the Commission is only coming in to amplify what is currently existing. And in setting up those provincial peace and national peace committees, we are drawing from the peace committees that are already in our communities, that are engaging on these issues, that are close to the victims, that know the situations on the ground, and using those platforms to then amplify to provincial, to national level. Why we are doing this is to create architectures for resolving of current conflicts. So even as we are looking at our past, we continue having current conflicts, but we also don't want outsiders to be coming in to resolve our conflict. We want to create spaces for provinces to sit with information coming from the different districts to influence our resolving of conflict at provincial and national level. It is these peace committees that we have a bird's eye view in terms of the peace situation at provincial level and recommend action that needs to be taken. So this again is a process that the Commission has started implementing and will continue. I think we will be in this part of the country in the next few weeks. The Commission is also, we will start outreach program, and I just want to mention that out of the strategic plan, in 2019, we prioritized engaging with the Kukurawundi issue. So we are not saying we are going to stop everything, and I think that person was asked yesterday, are we going to stop everything? The reason why we created these different enablers, having a thematic committee specifically looking at current conflicts, having a thematic committee looking at research, is to allow work to continue with priority on the ground. And I'm raising this because this directly sits within this region and Midlands. So this is the priority that we are going to initiate in 2019. So 2019 is just starting this process. It could be a process that will take the whole lifespan of the Commission. But the Commission has committed to ensuring that we start that engagement in 2019, realizing that this is one of the longest conflict epochs that the country, and in terms of magnitude, this is the feedback that we got. In terms of magnitude, this is one key conflict epoch that the Commission needs to start with, and we will be starting that, and we are starting now. And as part of that, this is why we are engaging. We've been to Much North, Much South, and some of the issues have been highlighted by Commissioner Leslie. But given the fact that women have been and continue to be the most affected by conflicts, one of the key actions for 2019 is having women's violence. They all did not agree that rape had happened. But we know in all our conflict episodes, women have been the most affected. And so what we are going to be doing through the Victim Support, Gender and Diversity is to have women on the spaces where women are going to be engaging. So even as we talk about Kukurawundi, women were disproportionately affected. And a lot of how they were affected are issues that cannot be shared in public. And so we are going to have to create spaces where women will engage. And out of that engagement would then facilitate coming up with the guidelines of how we can effectively engage with women. Again, this is a priority for 2019. We will also be starting outreach programs, hearings. And again, we'll appreciate that for us to even start hearings, we need to develop key enablers. How should it look like? How do we put safeguards to ensure that there is safety and security after people engage with those hearings? Again, this is a process we are doing. So this is part of our priorities for 2019, and we also remain guided by you, the stakeholders, in terms of how we should effectively, where do we get the women? Where should we go if we want to effectively engage with women? And how should we, because a lot of these are very contextual. Go to some areas, go to Chiredzi, for example. If you call for a meeting, you will find only older women. And because of young women's reproductive roles, you only find the older women. So how do we ensure that women in their diversity are represented in some of these spaces? And these are only issues that we can only be guided by you, the stakeholders. So this is just a snapshot in terms of where we are as a commission. And I want to emphasize that one of the strategic positions that the commission has taken is to consult. And people may feel that, why do you keep bringing people? It's acknowledging that a lot of people have been in the field, have been supporting victims. And so we want to be guided by them so that we do not do harm. Thank you very much.
It's not lie. It's true that those recreational centers, they do not cater for young people because we live in a 22nd generation, not 21st otherwise, 22nd.
Today we're at the Youth Ndebele, where the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Development, Professor Amo Morira, talks about Zimbabwe moving forward and stepping into attaining Education 5.0.
Thank you, Commissioner Ndebele. Thank you, Justice Nare. Commissioner Ndebele has already highlighted I'm an academic and I'm a member of the Research and Knowledge Management Committee of the NPRC. And as a committee, our task is quite a difficult one, but not very difficult. And maybe I may just highlight that I actually have one of my colleagues with me here, the gentleman I was taking at the back there, is also a member of the committee. So as a committee, our major task is that of evidence collection. Is to actually get to the root, to understand what could have happened with each of those conflict phases. What were the motivating factors? Then from there, we want to take it further, having compiled and gathered evidence. How best can we move forward as a nation? In other words, as researchers, looking at the best practice from elsewhere, we would want to pick lessons, to draw lessons, and say what can we borrow from Rwanda, Guatemala, Cambodia, South Africa, among others. What best can we pick from those that we can actually apply in our own situation? So our research is about learning from what has happened in Zimbabwe and also learning from outside Zimbabwe, that we can actually draw lessons as we move forward. That's number one. Secondly, we are also saying that as the Research and Knowledge Management Committee, we do not just want to research, we also want to archive evidence of what has happened in the past. That's why we've got the knowledge management component as part of the committee. We don't just research, we research and archive. Having archived, we are saying we want to store that for posterity. In the future, if anything is to happen, people should have somewhere where they can draw from as to what has already been done or what was done in the past by the current generation. So in that regard, that's why I said our task is rather a difficult one, because we have to look into the past, the present, and try to suggest movement into the future. Then as to where we are at the moment as a committee, we are still trying to find our feet. The committee is still in its formative stages, so to speak. We have had one full-fledged session so far as the full committee. Then subcommittees of that committee have also been meeting. And we have already identified various sectoral themes which we are going to take as we collect our data. And from there, we are hoping that we can now hit the ground running and get it to you as members of the committee to start gathering data from you. So if you haven't seen us, it's because we are still on our way. Otherwise, people may say, so what research are they doing? They haven't talked to us. We are on our way, we are coming. I thank you.
I'm here to talk about committee, the conflict prevention and non-recurrence of conflicts. This committee was set up at a meeting here in Bulawayo. The meeting was held on the 13th and 14th of May, where there were multi-stakeholder representatives. At that meeting, which is the committee is chaired by Commissioner Chiratsa. The committee to work with Commissioner Chiratsa was set up. There were elections held. We had our terms of reference circulated first, where as stakeholders we went through them. Then it was in the next day where we had the elections. What are the terms of reference for this committee? As the title speaks, it's about conflict prevention. It's about preventing the recurrence of conflicts again. What did we do on that day? We set up a team of leadership which was going to lead. First, the co-chairperson was elected, and that person is me, Mildred Site. I then co-chair with Commissioner Chiratsa. Then Pastor Hussein was elected to lead the transformation issues. May I kindly ask Pastor to stand up? Here is Pastor Hussein. He is the leader of the transformation section. As conflicts occur, we continue to relive these experiences. So the task of this committee is to make sure that we transform our conflicts into a process of a quality of life, which is quite a task, and that task involves all of us, and this is why we are here, and we continue to have these dialogues and engagement meetings. At that meeting, Uzwayo from Rwanda was elected to head the non-recurrence sector. Uzwayo ukhona yimba izolo, he was here. I don't see him today, but those of us who know him, he is the head of the non-recurrence. Then the early warning system, we have the Unomvula, Ongapuma Unomvula. Don't see her here. She is from a political party, as you heard earlier, that political parties are also involved in this consultation process and in the process of creating peace in the country. We then have a committee which has these representatives as leaders of different sections. Then we have a full committee. The full committee is about 25 people. May I kindly ask Commissioner from the police to stand up, and all those others who belong to our sector committee. Thank you very much. So this is a diverse committee. We have a task to transform conflicts, to make sure conflicts don't recur again. We have a task to make sure there's dialogue and engagement in order to transform these conflicts. we have a task to make sure that there are peace committees which are set up within the Southern region, because this committee is representing the Southern region of our country, which is Bulawayo, North and South. There were times I thought it would have been very ideal when that unity accord had been signed to set up such a committee of conflict prevention and non-recurrence, because that signature of creating peace and unity needed to have this up so that the conflict which had happened before should not happen again. So here you are, ladies and gentlemen. This is our terms of reference. We met first time on the 13th and 14th of May. Our second meeting is next week. And next week we are making a plan of how we are going to engage with stakeholders. And this is why we are here. Thank you very much.
I am part of the National Healing Reconciliation Committee. I've got my colleague here, Dr. Ndebele. I'm not sure whether there's someone else who is in that committee I might have missed. We formed at national level. So Dr. Ndebele, Fuzwayo is here. The other people were part of the National Healing Subcommittee. I think who are here. I want to recognize your presence, but also just for people to know that you are here. However, I want to also emphasize as I begin that regional committees have yet to be set up. So we did one meeting in Harare, and the mandate then was that our chair, who's Commissioner Ndebele, is working on the issue of trying to work on setting up the regional and provincial subcommittees. I think those are very important because they are the ones who are on the ground. What is the mandate of this committee? What was the framework or terms of reference? We drew our terms from the Commission's own terms. And we realized that this committee is actually at the heart of the work of the NPRC. Because if you look at section 252, subsection section A of the Constitution, talking about the Commission, it says to ensure post-conflict justice, healing, and reconciliation. And then in terms of section 252B, it is further mandated to develop and implement programs to promote national healing, unity, and cohesion in Zimbabwe, and the peaceful resolution of dispute. In section 252C of the Constitution, the Commission is also mandated to bring about national reconciliation by encouraging people to tell the truth about the past and facilitating the making of amends and the provisions of justice. So which would see the Commission, your essence in your service, or philisa abantu bakithi ukuthi kube lokuxolelana ngoba yezamele isebenze ukuthi ibe zinyawo lezandla ze-commission ukuthi abantu baxolelane ukuthanisa abantu kube lokuzwisisana yiyo into besiyikhangele lokhu azange sikuqalise khona phana kodwa kudonswa-ke enhloseni ye-commission kwayo sakhangela ukuthi yiziphi impawu ze-commission esizasebenza under zona sabona ukuthi thina sithatha okuningi kwakhona njalo-ke sizakwenza kanjani ngathi kumbe ngubani sasesithina ngubani umuntu ozadinga ukuthi aphiliswe sakhangela ukuthi ungabe kungubani any person affected by dispute or conflict arising out of any action or omission on the part of an authority or person and may in any one of the officially recognized languages express their grievances. So in other words, sathina sizadinga ungabe kungubani who survived, who is a victim, could have been affected by any action by an authority. That person falls under the category of our stakeholders that we are targeting. And we said we will then work at giving them that opportunity to express themselves, but also to work at working with communities that have been affected by disputes and violence in the past some of it we saw which it affected the whole community. Therefore, we need to target them as a community. What are the areas and what manner shall this work? We said that we'll identify areas or scenes of violence at community level. For example, mass graves, shallow graves, and work with families and communities close to those who passed on how to handle that. We will refer specific cases, some of them to other thematic committees that might come to us, like research committee which was here. They will probably have a lot of work to do with us, and the victim, the guys will do a lot of investigations. We'll also work with them, but also this committee will liaise a lot with government departments on specific community issues that need attention to facilitate healing. I think this point has been emphasized. We'll identify specific cases that need attention at individual level, for example, medical attention, and refer them, documentation, outstanding pensions and gratuities, and refer them to relevant authorities. But also a big emphasis in our community was protection of witnesses, that we need to ensure that witnesses are protected. And we drew the mandate from section 1014 of the NPRC Act that actually protects the victims and survivors. That any person who threatens or without lawful cause discourages or dissuades any person from testifying before the commission or before other committees appointed by the commission shall be guilty of an offense and liable to a fine not exceeding level 12 or imprisonment for a period not exceeding 10 years or both such fine and such imprisonment. Well, we would bring healing, but also there is that a constitutional provision to ensure that survivors and victims are protected, because I think that's the key issue. I want to emphasize that because Ndebele and region and Midlands were heavily affected in terms of post-independence violence, ground and so forth. I think the issue of formation of these subcommittees within these provinces is an urgent issue, because that's where a lot of work will be done. And I'm sure it's been priority, it's been prioritized, and I'm sure that will be done. Otherwise, I want to thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Commissioners, religious leaders who may be present, traditional leaders who may be present, members of the security, uniformed or non-uniformed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jenny Williams. I'm the Director of Women of Zimbabwe Arise, WOZA. I'm also the coordinator of Ndebele Collective. I was asked to attend the Victim Support, Gender and Diversity Subcommittee on behalf of the Ndebele Collective, and I attended with some of my colleagues who I see here. In the meeting, we received a briefing, much as you've received the briefing today, of the focus, the epochs, and the priority areas that have been selected by the NPRC in 2019 and going forward in the strategic plan. On the first day, we shared some considerable ideas, concepts around what we felt could be central to how victims felt they had space and scope to attend meetings, to testify during hearings, and to be safe and feel that the issues that are central to their healing and their lives will be officially dealt with, and unofficially they will be safe to continue to live their lives and achieve a measure of healing. We felt also that it was important to look and drill down specifically on issues of gender and how those impact directly on men, women, be they elderly or young. And for me, it was very crucial that we also were able to understand that NPRC has been very responsive to the need for gender, But I was even more excited as someone of this region to see that the NPRC have also brought in the issue of diversity. Because for us, as people of this region, we seem to have much more diversity as we come from so many different spaces, cultures, and ethnicities. However, during the post-independence period, we seemed to have been targeted mainly because of our diversities. So the Victims Support Gender and Diversity Subcommittee is split into two committees. The Victim Support, where we want to really be able to develop the architecture around how victims will be put at the center of the work of NPRC. And we also had the Gender and Diversity Committee. Some TORs, terms of reference, were achieved during those 2 days in Harare. We also then have developed our work plans and firmed up on the terms of reference. What has not yet been done has been the setting of the regional subcommittees, and we are looking forward to working with Neti as we convene the Victim Support Gender Diversity Committees to sit and select their leadership at regional level within the next week or so. I think just to look at some of the key functions, we said that the Victim Support Subcommittee, of which I was elected as the chairperson with the National Transitional Justice Working Group, I'm not sure if anybody is here from there, as the vice chair, and the Counseling Services Unit as the secretariat. Our functions are to develop guidelines for the NPRC on how to engage effectively with victims using the Do No Harm Victim-centered approach, to identify and generate a list of specialized service providers, to refer victims to engaging with the Commission on a case-by-case basis. The subcommittee will develop a referral system or mechanism for victims engaging with the NPRC to access services. So it is very important for any of you who feel you have services that you can render to victims to please identify yourselves to myself and my co-chair Neti Musano, so that we make sure that we have you ready to receive people who we may refer to you. We also felt that as the oversight committee of this victim support, we wanted to capacitate, support the commissioners to prepare and be trained for victim engagement. We are very alive to the fact, as Ndebele and Collective, as WOZA, that some of the processes we felt that NPRC were not yet ready to receive us. And perhaps we were still very emotional about the issue, or perhaps we just simply didn't trust them to be genuine. So we wanted to make sure that we capacitate commissioners and include that there's some basic training in trauma identification, basic counseling skills, how to document and interview victims of trauma, and other trainings that must be determined by the subcommittee as we go forward and recommend it to the NPRC. We also wanted to be able to make sure, as civic society, we are very seized with our oversight role. We wanted to make sure we accompany the NPRC process and to accompany the victims, ensuring that victim support services are present whenever the Commission engages with victims. Yes, we might have different forms of outreach that are not hearings, but because we are highly traumatized as a people, as a nation, sometimes you are re-stimulating some trauma, and we need to make sure that you are able to be supported and make sure that that trauma doesn't invoke other harsher circumstances for you. We also felt that we must monitor and evaluate the Commission's victim engagement strategy and implementation, providing regular feedback and reports to the Commission. I'm very happy to see that we also identified some key issues that we are still to work on and develop the architecture, and also make sure that we develop the gender policy. And some of those will be how we factor in the victim's lived experience, how their victimhood is acting out in their lives, and how we can make sure that they are supported to overcome the trauma. We also felt that organizations maybe are there who can support the processes, but we wanted to make sure that they understand the ways and the architecture of victim support. We also wanted to understand that the Ministry of Health has a very important role to also play, along with our civic society partners, ensuring that there's some psychosocial support that they're able to avail. And also, indeed, 30 or 40 years, 35 years later, there are still some people who have suffered trauma, whether through Gukurondi, whether through electoral violence, who need some medical interventions that they've never managed to receive. We also felt that the police need to understand the space must be there for victims to freely participate and to feel that they are not immediately under threat from the uniform, that they will be able to be safe during, after, and when they return to their homes should they testify, and that their evidence that they give, and whether we like it or not, Bantu Bagiti, we have to understand that some of the people who are said to be perpetrators might be in very powerful positions, but it's important that the police are able to locate their role in making sure the safety of victims as they give their testimonies, and that perpetrators also understand their role, whether they are have been prosecuted or not. Traditional leaders, as civic society, we are very hot on the issue of participation fully of all traditional leaders. And so, as the Victim Support Committee, we will want to make sure that they have a role to play, and they also are the guardians for us of our diversity and culture. The Judicial Service Commission, we also felt, have a very important role to play. So I was very happy to also be able to feel accompanied by Skatele, there she is, Skatele Matambo. Please stand up, just let people see you, who is also one of the office bearers of the separate subcommittee on gender and diversity. So together as CA, we will expect to make sure that most of you are able to be present next week and put yourself in positions to get elected and participate and support us at national level as we do the work of the Victim Support, Gender and Diversity. I think Madam Co-Chair and Commissioner Leslie, Nari is not here, those in summary are the key points that I have to share. Ngiyabonga.